Welcome to the Winner's Walk podcast, where you will learn from today's top Christian leaders how to fulfill your divine destiny and to live the victorious life God has called you to live. By sharing their godly wisdom and stories of success, we hope our guests will inspire, educate, and motivate you to walk like the winner God made you to be. And now, here's the host for Winner's Walk, Neil Clark.
Hey winners, I'm your host Neil Clark, and I'm excited for today's show. We are honored and blessed to have as our guest one of today's top Christian leaders, Mr. Joe Schmidt. Now Joe, many of you will know, spent 20 years in digital marketing as both an entrepreneur and an investor. He co-founded Canvas On Demand in 2003 and took it from a startup to the Inc. 500 list of fastest growing companies. This earned him a spot as a finalist in the Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. In 2010, in September, Joe sold his company to online custom products leader Cafe Press. Then, that's when his heart was broken by the realities of modern slavery, and he left to do something audacious for humanity, which is to work to end slavery. He founded a nonprofit and is now the chief executive officer of freedomunited.org that works every day to end modern slavery. It's my great pleasure to welcome to the show, Mr. Joe Schmidt.
Thank you. It is so good to be here.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's just start off the show. I like to start off the show just by asking a little bit about your background, if you would share a little bit and tell us where you're from.
Background, I'm from Indiana. I'm a Midwesterner. Spent my life growing up in an entrepreneurial family, old school Catholic. Fell in love with a girl in undergrad. Went to a school called Ball State for undergrad. It was the only school I could get in based on my particular academic performance at the time. She was able to go there because it was the best teaching school in the state. But they had an entrepreneurship program that I had a lot of fun with, and I'd been starting businesses since I was 12 or 13 years old. Always really interested in figuring out how to make money and give services to people and things like that. So ended up down here in the Carolinas. Actually, after graduate school, I went to Boston College for grad school after undergrad, and then chased the same girl that I had been dating back in Indiana down here to North Carolina. And we just celebrated our 20th
congratulations.
not long ago. So we'd been here in the Raleigh-Durham area really since 96. So which is kind of crazy. That's 22 years, because 96 seemed like it was like 96.
Right.
Like that wasn't that long ago. We spent a couple of years up in New York City in a startup that I'd done up there. So we lived in Manhattan for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun. But otherwise, we've been here in the Raleigh area. And I spent almost my whole career marketing. So started with just old school kind of brand marketing stuff, and working as a consultant and in advertising agencies, and then eventually transitioned as the internet was developed to be promoting online and working on the internet pre-Google, and then started my first company probably my first real business probably 17 years ago. And since have just started kind of a series of online ventures. So the majority of the stuff that I either start or invest in are on the internet using technology in some way, shape, or form.
Now, what gave you that entrepreneurial spirit? Where did you learn that from, or has that always been there?
Yeah, so it was my dad. So I grew up in a good house. Mom and dad both loved me a lot. Their marriage didn't work out like I think they would have wanted it to. But I certainly didn't lack for love and support and belief in me. And so I have no complaints. And in fact, the opposite, my mother made me very daring, and she made me the humanitarian that I think I am today. And I use that term just in the spirit that I believe it's my job to just fight for human beings, no matter who you are. I think that's what we're called to do. My dad, though, so every summer, he was a traveling sales guy. And so I'd get out of school. He'd put his briefcase on the passenger seat of his whatever kind of big company car he had at the time. It was usually a Pontiac Bonneville.
The boat.
And yes, it was gigantic. And I would load up in the passenger seat of his Bonneville, probably starting when I was about 7. And I would just roll with him for the summer. So he'd be on the road selling construction materials, and I was his navigator, and everything from his navigator to his resume sorter. When he'd have to hire a new sales guy, I was the first one who would go through resumes. I don't know if he actually used them, because I was probably like 9 or 10 when I was going through resumes. I hope that I wasn't actually shaping people's future, but yeah. So I spent all those years growing up hanging out with my dad, who was incredibly entrepreneurial, and so it was really in my system, and I loved it, and creating stuff out of nothing and all that was really a lot of fun to me. And so I've definitely been continuing to do that really ever since I was a kid, and Pop put that in my spirit. My mom does the same thing. She tends to lean more on ministry side and creating situations where she can impact people's lives, but it's all the same philosophies and principles that you use in entrepreneurship, where the number one goal is creating revenue or creating profit. She uses all those.
Now, is that where you were? Is that where you got your spiritual background? Is from your parents, or from where did that all come to when you finally accepted Jesus?
So I grew up Catholic. So there wasn't really an accepting Jesus moment. Growing up Catholic. I mean, I loved growing up Catholic. It was great. I went to great Catholic schools and enjoyed my church family. We were pretty involved. The priests that shaped my life were actually pretty amazing dudes. And then I would say that somewhere in my mid 20s all the way up to about 30, I was just kind of started to get done with the rigmarole of non-relational driven faith.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of stand up, sit down, follow the rules, do this, don't do that. I started to question some things specifically with the Catholic Church, just things that I didn't necessarily know if I believed, based on the Bible itself. And then it was actually about 16 years ago. It was no more than 16 years ago. My wife drugged me to a church startup called New Hope.
Yeah.
And it was maybe their 4th Sunday at a high school over in Chapel Hill, and didn't want to go. Wasn't really going to mass at that time. So, I mean, I was pretty much just kind of taking a big break, and went to New Hope. It was all fascinating. it was new. It was all a little weird too, because like there were people with their hands up, like all this, this thing called the worship center, and words like worship and ministry and things that all sounded kind of cheesy and goofy to me. But Benji Kelly, who's the senior pastor there, still the senior pastor today, is just a really great teacher. And he started it, I think, with me as an adult. He grabbed me, and what he was saying made sense. Mm-hmm. I probably agreed with 80 to 90% of what he was saying, and then was ready to go toe to toe with him on a lot of it. I was very well educated on the Bible, because I'd been to Catholic grade school, high school, college. I'd done it all. But it was really, I think, at New Hope that I started to become an adult in my walk with Christ, and start to realize, at least for me, what my philosophical approach to what being a Christian means, which I think is different for everybody. I think everybody's got their own approach to what their walk looks like, or to what God calls them to do. And so it really was New Hope that helped shape that. And eventually my relationship with Benji is one of my best buddies now.
Right.
He and I, and I've had the opportunity to do everything at New Hope that exists on a volunteer basis.
Right. Well, that's awesome. Yeah,
yep.
I think that relationship is definitely important once you get that done. And New Hope is definitely grown, and is a growing, thriving church, and that's awesome. So now, to go back, you started Canvas on Demand, which I think was the one big success in 2003. And what kind of led up to that, and what kind of principles did you use at that time to help that be very successful?
Canvas on Demand actually came out of a mistake we had made. My business partner, a guy named Tom. Tom and I had left a company that we were working at, and we bought a business with a tremendous amount of debt. So we did everything that you're not supposed to do. We leveraged houses and all kinds of stuff that we shouldn't have done. And we bought a business, and it turned out the business was a bit of a sham, and we had been misled during due diligence. And so we found ourselves with this company that we owed a lot of money for having bought it. We had a little bit of cash that was in the business, and that's where we started to whip up some businesses as fast as we could. We actually started 7 businesses in 7 months.
Oh, wow.
All kind of in search of trying to find something that could replace this business that we had purchased. And one of those things was Canvas on Demand, which was uploading your photo online and us printing them on large format digital printers and turning them into artwork. And it took, it was an overnight 4-year success.
Right.
We finally got to a couple $1 million after maybe 3 or 4 years. And then that business, that business was all about growth hacking for us. So I've always been a bit of a growth hacker, figuring out new channels and new ways to speak to customers. But the cornerstone of the business was to deliver a product that just blew people's minds.
Right.
And the customers would show off their product to everybody that they possibly could. And we used a lot of word of mouth marketing, and business grew really well and still exists to this day. It's a great company, great website, still run by 200 of my favorite people who are our employees over there, and spawned out 4 or 5 other sites at the time. that all were pretty successful all around the kind of online art space.
Now, did you have any mentors in those businesses or during that period of time? Is that obviously you had a partner, but were there mentors that were helping you through that process?
What was cool about the journey that God kind of took me on during all this is that, so when I was introduced to New Hope was really at the beginning of this disaster of us buying a business and being on the verge of bankruptcy, and like things were bad. Things were not good. Plus we were having like our first kid, and we were broke, and anyway, everything kind of sucked. But that's when I started to get involved in New Hope, and it was cool because what I really ended up with was I ended up with sort of two partners, not including my primary partner, which is my wife, but two partners on the church and the business front. So
Right.
Benji and I really became connected at the hip and started growing New Hope. And my business partner, Tom, and I were connected at the hip, really focused on our entrepreneurial ventures. And it was cool because, and pretty much inexplicable, the growth at which the business was seeing as I used the business to continue to bless New Hope and use my time to continue to bless New Hope. At least for me, it was very obvious that the two of them were working in tandem.
Right.
Not just the financial blessings, but just time and talent and my employees. I had my employees were starting to head over to New Hope, and we had, everybody was going to New Hope. And so it was really a combination of my pastor, who was my partner, on growing, because the year that we were on the Inc. 500 list, that we were 283 on Inc. 500, New Hope was number 6 in the country of fastest growing churches in America.
Wow.
And I was the senior lay leader at the church, and I was the founder of this business. And so it was just cool. God was really just kind of floating the two. I always think about it like that, when you blow into that thing and you try to keep the ping pong ball kind of floating.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they just both kept kind of floating up and floating up and floating up as I was paying more and more attention to making sure that we were stewarding well, that we were building a business that loved its employees, building a business that loved its customers, while I was over launching campuses at New Hope, and I was the campus pastor at our first campus, on the side while I was CMO of a public company, working out of California and then flying home to get to Thursday night worship practice, because now I was the campus pastor at a campus where they raise their hands and act all weird. So anyway, it was just a cool journey that I could have never invented.
Right.
That was all well beyond me, and definitely God's plan.
It reminds me of kind of 3 John 2, beloved, I wish above all things that you prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. It seems like the journey at New Hope was prospering your soul, and therefore your business and everything outside of that just really started to come together as well. And that's awesome. So, now what you kind of made a transition after you sold your company in 2010, and it was obviously you were very engaged at New Hope, but then you also had, what kind of pricked your heart there? I think you said in the intro that it was during that time frame where you started hearing about what you're doing today, and how did you transition from one to the other?
Sure. So I'll start with, so today I am the founder of an organization called Freedom United. Freedom United, we're the largest online community of abolitionists in the world. So what that means is we focus on the topic of modern slavery. Modern slavery defined as main topics are everything from sex trafficking to forced labor to domestic servitude to forced marriage under the age of 12 or 13 years old. And so what we do is we have a global community, an online community where we are called on by nonprofits all over the world who come to us, ask for our support, our advocacy support in work that they're doing on the ground somewhere. So, for example, we just had a win in a country called Mauritania, where slavery is rampant, governmental slavery, where they had locked up an activist who we know well, and the on the ground organization in Mauritania who was trying to get this activist free called on us. We launched a global campaign trying to shine a light on that evil that was happening, and with the goal of getting that activist freed. And so we have anywhere from 30 to 50 campaigns running, everything from trying to, I feel like every once in a while we'll go through this phase where all we're trying to do is get people out of prison, but we're trying to get activists freed out of prison in countries all over the world, to holding companies accountable for their supply chains. We have a big campaign going on right now asking Monster energy drinks to step up and disclose where their sugar comes from, which is their number one ingredient in all of their products. Merely asking them to do what their largest shareholder, Coca-Cola, does on a regular basis, which is disclose where their sugar comes from. There's a lot of sugar in the slavery world,
Right.
And so that's what we do. That's my day-to-day job is running this organization. We are I just found this out. We are the fourth largest nonprofit on Facebook in the world.
Oh, wow.
We have 5.9 million Facebook fans, which is just crazy. I knew we had a bunch of folks and we do a ton of work on Facebook, but I'd never compared us to anybody else. So when I was wrapping up my time after we'd sold our company, I made a decision that I needed to respond audaciously to God's overwhelming blessing on my life. He'd taken a broken entrepreneur who was far from him, who was looking at potentially filing bankruptcy, and was even questioning whether God existed, to flipping me around to getting to pastor a church, to eventually be the chief marketing officer of a public company and ring the bell on NASDAQ, and financially secure our family to the point where I could take time off and not make money for a while and go do whatever he wanted me to do. And all of that was just so overwhelming to me that I felt like me going and playing golf probably wouldn't be an appropriate response. For me, it would be fishing or bow hunting, but any of those things just didn't feel like the right response for me personally. And so made the decision to build a mantra of 10 million people in 10 years. So at 41, made the commitment to go try to positively and significantly love and impact 10 million people's lives over the next 10 years of my life, between 41 and 51. Somehow trafficking was the thing that sort of, God just kept opening doors and opening doors and opening doors. And before I knew it, I was taking over the world's largest abolition movement from a billionaire in Australia, who'd started this about 7 years ago, who gave it to me for $1. He put over $16 million into it over 4 or 5 years. To all of a sudden, I'm standing on the United Nations floor of the Security Council, demanding the Security Council to go after ISIS for acts of modern slavery. I don't know, just like just crazy stuff. And so anyway, and now I'm here, and I do this on a regular basis, and it's all been so well beyond my comprehension of how it could have all happened, and just God blessing us along the way and introducing us to people that we would have that I had never imagined would show up to be helpful. And now we fight slavery on a daily basis, and which is an intense it's an intense thing.
What resources is there somewhere that people can connect with you and the movement that you're to be able to help out?
Yeah, so you can go to freedomunited.org. If you go to freedomunited.org, and the easiest thing to do is go there and click ACT, or just start reading the homepage. And we've got 30 to 40 campaigns going on right now around the world. Just reading about them and finding one that you actually want to put your signature on is really the first step in becoming part of this movement. There's more than 40 million people in the world who are enslaved today. It's actually more people than ever.
Wow.
There's more people enslaved today in the world than ever in all of history, which is totally unacceptable, and just lets you know that Satan is alive and prowling around like a lion. I think he loves this. I think this is one of his favorite things. That slavery is like his playground. And by putting your signature on one of these campaigns, we literally use them. We use all these signatures, and we use these petitions to go out and change the world, and ask companies or lawmakers or society to think about things differently. So just head to freedomunited.org and check it out.
Well, hey, Joe, I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. And we'll definitely put up your website to make sure everybody can take some action. And it was great having you on. And I know everybody got a lot of value. I know I did out of it. So appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Winners Walk.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to connect with us at www.winnerswalk.com for more information on our next podcast and to download your free checklist, the 10 success principles of today's Christian leaders that you can copy. God bless, and walk like the winner God made you.